In today's video, I'm going to show you how to make this cute stuffed pumpkin perfect for fall decor. Hi, I'm Jamieson-Hirst of Chatterbox Quilts, and these are really easy to make, and you don't need a lot of supplies. A good way to use up some fat quarters, maybe layer cake, maybe even some scrap fabrics. So let's get started by going over what you need to make these different little pumpkins. And by the way, you can make them in different sizes. So I'm going to be showing you how to make the larger one today, but I'll explain how you can change up your fabric sizes to make whatever size you want. So the first thing you're going to need is fabric for the pumpkin, right? So you can choose something that's kind of, pumpkinish, if you will, or, something a little different. Whatever you want to make your pumpkin out of will be just fine. Make sure you press that fabric out so there's no wrinkles in it before you get started. Now the fabric piece that I'm using here is actually 7.5 inches by 15.5, and it makes this size of pumpkin, but you can use, smaller sizes of fabric, height and width, and make little tiny pumpkins if you want, or you could even use bigger pieces of fabric and go really big. Okay, but I think this is kind of a nice size to work with, so that's what we're going to be working with today. You're also going to need some felt. So you need some felt for the stem. So I have brown. That seems kind of obvious, but again, you can use whatever color you want. And you can cut this. I should talk to you about the size of the felt for the stem, because you can cut it whatever size you want. We're actually going to roll it up to make that stem. So this is about 3.5 inches by, I think it's about 9. 9's a good length. And if I wanted to make it shorter, or if I want to make it higher, I could do that for my stem. If you want to make it fatter around, then you're going to need a longer piece of felt. Okay, then I've got a couple different pieces of green here for the leaves, and we'll talk about those later. And you can put as many leaves on your pumpkin as you want. I kind of like to put at least two on, maybe three, whatever you want to do. And again, that may depend a little bit on the size of your pumpkin. And make sure your leaves are proportionate to the size of your pumpkin. I think little tiny leaves might look a little strange on a big pumpkin. All right. Other things we need. Well, you're going to need some pipe cleaners. Now I've got these. I've got a brown, I've got a darker green, I've got kind of a bright green here, which is what I used on my sample. So you're going to use these to make the stems on your pumpkin. Again, you can add as many as you'd like, and you can have whatever width or length, I should say, you want for them too. So the other thing you're going to need is you're going to need some strong thread. Now I like to use pearl cotton. I've got a Wonderfil. It's number 8, and that worked really well on this project. And then I've got a tapestry or crewel needle here to work with this, because it's a little bit thicker thread. And of course, you're going to need stuffing. So I've got some stuffing here. You're going to use quite a bit of it. Well, again, that depends on the size of your pumpkin, but the bigger one that I'm working with today takes quite a bit of stuffing. So never underestimate how much stuffing you may need for your project. And we are going to use our sewing machine a little bit. And we're also going to need a glue gun. I've got it's on here, so I gotta be careful with it. I've got a cool temperature glue gun here, because I always seem to get stuck on the glue gun, and the cool one isn't quite as painful as the regular ones, and it works just fine for this project. Scissors and a pencil is also helpful. So that's what you need to get started on the project. Of course, the first thing you want to do is get your fabric cut to the size that you're going to use, right? So as I said, we've got 7.5 by 15.5 inch here. And the next thing you need to do is you need to run a basting stitch along the top about 1/4 inch in. So I'm going to show you how to do that. You could do it by hand. I'm going to do it on the machine. Now, before we get started sewing here, there's a few things you need to know. These threads are going to be used to gather up the bottom of the pumpkin. So you want to make sure that you leave a long top and bobbin thread, okay, good, 6 to 8 inches. You can never have them too long, right? And you don't want to lock your stitches at the beginning or at the end of the stitching. And you're going to be stitching with a 1/4 inch seam, approximately 1/4 inch seam. You also want to make sure you leave long tails, top and bobbin, at the end as well. So when you're done, you're just going to pull your project out and you're going to clip those threads, again, leaving a nice long tail. So you'll have a nice long tail somewhere there at the beginning. Tails, I should say, there's 2 of them, and at the end. Okay. Now you use that basting stitch to give you that 1/4 inch stitching on the fabric along the long edge, and now you need to adjust your stitching to, your regular length, whether that's 2.1 or 2.4, whatever it may be when you sew a seam, because we are going to fold our fabric in half and we are going to stitch the short edges together with a 1/4 inch seam. Now when you do this, you want to make sure that you do not catch these long tails in that stitching, okay? So you want to make sure that you can just go along and you can stop just before you get to those long tails, okay, or that 1/4 inch seam at the top. Well, it's not really a seam, 1/4 inch stitching at the top, okay? You want to lock your stitches at the beginning and at the end for this stitching. All right, so now we have a nice tube, right? And you should take your tube and you should take your seam on your tube and open it up and give it a nice press. I'm just gonna finger press this for now, but taking it to your iron is a good idea. Then what you want to do is you want to locate those long threads and you want to separate them out. So I've got my bobbin thread on this side, my top thread there, so I keep those away. I'm going to hang on to those guys for the time being because I want to knot one side only, okay? So I'm going to take these guys, I'm going to knot them, get them down as close as I can. I'm actually going to grab a pin because I like to do this, is to take my pin and put it in the loop and then just slide that knot right down to the stitching, okay? There's a little tip for you. All right, so I can actually cut this shorter because I'm not going to be doing too much with this end. It's already knotted. That's all I needed to do. Next thing I want to do is I want to gather this edge, okay? This is going to be the bottom of my pumpkin. So I'm going back to the long tails. There's only long tails left now. And usually it works best with my bobbin thread rather than the top thread. I'm just going to start gently pulling and you're going to see your fabric is going to start gathering along there. So I like to move my gathers along as we go. Okay, just take your time and do this and kind of get them towards the other end as much as possible. And you can always divide them up evenly, around the circle, the tube. It's going to become a little circle. It's going to become a very tiny circle eventually, hopefully a closed circle eventually, but we're just moving this along. Okay, so when you've got it pulled but as tight as it's going to go, like you have to be careful. If you start pulling too tight, you're going to snap your thread and then you're going to be back to square one, right? So you're going to get it down so it's pretty small, all right? And at that point in time, you can either tie off that side, those long tails if you want, or I don't even bother doing that. I just kind of hold it in, okay? Kind of match up the two sides, all right? Those gathers are fairly even. You don't have to stress over this too much. It's going to be the bottom. You're not really going to see it. All you need to do is make sure it's gathered together and that it is sewn down so that it won't come apart. And that's our next step. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use my regular stitch length and I'm just going to stitch across inside towards the open edge of this pumpkin body. Okay, so I'm just going to lock my stitches, stitch across, lock my stitches again, and that's going to keep that bottom together. All right, so I've got that all sewn down And at this point in time, I will clip off all these excess threads because I don't want them hanging around and getting in the way of next steps. Now my next step is to do a running stitch on the open edge, and I want to make sure that this is made with a really strong thread. So maybe upholstery thread, or in my case, I'm going to use some pearl cotton. I'm using some Wonderfil, it's a number 8 pearl cotton. And I'm using just a tapestry or a crewel needle here, something that has an eye big enough to take that thickness of thread. And I want to put a knot in it, so I'm going to do a quilter's knot here, just wrap it around about 3 times. Make sure there's a good solid knot in there. Pull my needle through, there we go, we got that nice knot there. And before I start stitching, I want to take the pumpkin body and turn it right side out. Okay, so here's my little pumpkin body. All right, I don't have to fuss with it too much yet, but you get an idea of kind of what it's going to look like. And there's its little bottom part here. Okay, so let's start at the seam. And we're going to go from the inside to the outside. Okay, make sure that that doesn't pull through your fabric. Sometimes that can happen, especially if you're not using a really thick thread. And I'm just going to do like a running stitch along here, about 1/4 inch from the top. Okay, it doesn't have to be perfect, but approximately 1/4 inch from the top. You don't want to have it any closer because as you start pulling and stuff, the fabric might start fraying a little bit, and you might find that the fabric frays off of your running stitch. Okay, when I come back the other side, I'm going to go just a little bit past where I started. I'm going to pull this open. I really don't want to gather at this point in time. It's sort of happening as I'm stitching along, but I'm just going to go a little bit past where I started here. Okay, so I'm going to pull that out. I'm going to leave the needle in. I'm going to leave a long thread. Obviously, if the needle's in, there's probably a long thread there, right? Because the next step is to stuff. So I need to get my stuffing. And I like to take out handfuls of it and kind of roll it a bit and put it down in the bottom. And as I mentioned before, you probably will use a lot of stuffing, especially if it's a big one like this, a big pumpkin like this. And just take your time and get it all down there, and you kind of start shaping the pumpkin a bit as you're stuffing. I'm almost finished stuffing. I'll make sure I get all this stuffing down in there as much as I can, as plump as I want my pumpkin to be. And when I think I've got it, you know, about right, you can play with squishing it around a bit and molding your pumpkin a little bit. And then it's time to close the top. So we've still got that embroidery thread in there. So at this point in time, we're going to start pulling it gently to close the top. And with this thick thread like this, it works really well. So I'm just going to keep pulling a little bit, making sure my little gathers are kind of even. You don't need to stress over this too much, because sometimes when things are perfectly imperfect, it gives them a really nice look, actually. Kind of a natural, more natural look, right? Pumpkins aren't perfect, are they? No, they're not. Okay, so when I get that in there, and I'm happy with how it looks, you can massage your pumpkin a bit there, okay? Then I want to tie this off, right? So let's get my needle. Oh, look at how much longer that embroidery thread got, right? So I'm just going to take my needle back in here, just in and out within that stitching, if I can, just so I've got it in there and I can pull again and get that knot in there. Okay, I've got it pulled in. You have to hold this down, right? And I'm going to put my needle in a couple times, and then we're going to go and pull really nice and fast. Hopefully that knots up good. There we go. All right. You can knot it a couple times if you'd like. I'm just going to leave it like that for now because we're going to be putting some glue on here. So trim off your thread, and there's my little pumpkin so far. All right. And actually, he's smaller than this guy. I thought they were the same size, but no, I guess I use a bigger piece of fabric for that one. I think almost a fat quarter. But anyway, now I'm going to have 3 sizes of pumpkin, so I'm happy about that. So let's go to the next step. And let me get my needle out of the way. Don't like stray needles. So the next step is making some parts to add on to the pumpkin. And the first thing we want to make is the stem. All right, so I've got my piece of felt that I cut before. right? It's right there. I'm gonna move my pumpkin right out of the way to move things out of the way here. And I've got my glue gun, okay? So I've got a cool glue gun. And because I'm working on a surface where I do not want to get any glue, which is probably any surface you're working on, I just put some parchment paper down here, okay? You can put some freezer paper down, parchment paper, whatever you want, just to protect the surface that you're working on. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to roll up, not roll up the rim if you're in Canada and you're a Tim Hortons fan, but roll up the felt, okay? And so I'm trying to keep my edge straight along here as I go so that I don't have a too wonky a looking stem, all right? So I'm gonna roll it up here, and then I'm gonna run a line of glue along the edge. So I'm gonna use my hot glue gun. I just have to go over here and get it. And I'm gonna run some glue along here. Hopefully it's still hot, there we go. It's been sitting there just waiting for me. All right, and then I'm just going to roll it closed. Just hold it for a second. It doesn't take that long. And there we go. Okay, so there we go. We got our nice little stem. So whatever side looks better to you, okay, if one side looks better than the other, that's the side you can leave up that you'll see, right? The other side is going to go onto the pumpkin. Now, this guy's looking pretty funny, right? Because the pumpkin is much smaller than my stem. So I can fix that a couple different ways. I can make a new stem if I wanted to. Maybe I want to keep this stem for another pumpkin. Or maybe I just can, you know, cut it to whatever I think is about the right size. So let's do that, shall we? There we go. And now I have another stem for a smaller pumpkin, maybe. There we go. That looks a bit better, doesn't it? All right. So the next thing I'm going to do is attach it to the pumpkin body. So again, hot glue gun or glue gun comes to the rescue. And so I'm just going to put some glue around the center area of the pumpkin. And we're going to stick that stem right in there. So if you have a little bit of a hole in the center where you can see the stuffing, then that might be the perfect place to put your stem, right? And cover it all up. It covers a multitude of things you don't want to see, right? All right, just hold it down there for a second, and there we go. So there's my little stem on my pumpkin. Great. It also needs a few other things. So it needs some leaves and it needs some stems. Well, another stem, or whatever you call them. I don't know what those little curly things are you call them pumpkins. If you know, put it in the comment below. I call them stems, but this is a stem too. Whatever. Okay, so this is where our pipe cleaners come into play, right? So I'm going to take a dark green one here, and you also need your pencil, okay? So I'm going to take my pencil, and I'm going to start wrapping the pipe cleaner around the pencil. If you have kids, grandkids, this is a great thing for them to do to help you with this project. And then we can just pull it off. And my stem is probably going to be, you want to pull the pencil out here, not the eraser off the pencil. Here we go. Okay. So you might want this to be shorter, okay? So again, depending on the size of your pumpkin, this is looking pretty big, right? So I am going to cut off an end of it. It doesn't matter which end. I mean, I might keep that guy and cut off some of this here. Just take your scissors, give it a snip there, and that looks much better, right? So that can go on the pumpkin, but first I'm going to make them, and then I'm going to put them on in a second. Well, let's do a bright green one. Why not, right? So let's do another one here. Same thing, just around the pencil. And if you want to make these different lengths, you could certainly do that too. Maybe you want a short one, maybe you want a long one. Maybe we do keep this one and use it as well, right? And put it on. Again, I'm going to cut this one back a little bit because I think it's going to look too long otherwise. All right, so let's say I've got those, and I'm going to use those for my pumpkin. Whatever they are. Stems, I call them. They're not stems, but whatever. The little tendrils. Tendrils? Now the other thing you need to do is to make some leaves. So you can see that the pumpkin sample has some leaves on it, and you can make as many as you'd like. And before I had two different colors of felt, so a darker green and a lighter one, and I just freehand cut these out. If you wanted to, you could draw the leaf shape and then cut it out. Maybe use a friction pen or some erasable marker. And I've already done that, so I actually have cut out 3 different leaves for this particular pumpkin. I think those will work size-wise. And again, you know, cut the leaves to the appropriate size for your pumpkin. So the ones on this pumpkin you can see are quite a bit bigger than these. All right. So now that I've got all these components, we need to attach them to the pumpkin, right? So I'm going to start with the leaves and then add the little tendrils on, okay? So wherever I want leaf number 1, we're just going to put a little bit of glue on there, and they're probably going to be close to the stem you've already put on. All right, we're just going to stick it in there. There we go. And let's see, we've got another leaf. I'm going to put this one maybe here and then maybe this one here. So you can audition your placement first before you actually glue them on. Let's go over here. With this guy. Yes, and I know my parchment paper is noisy, but it is certainly helpful to protect things. And we'll put another one kind of overlapping the first one a little bit. Alrighty, there we go. Oh, it got me. I always get got at least once with the hot glue gun, but it's not that hot, this one, thank goodness. Okay, now we have our little tendril guys. So let's see, where do we want to put the tendrils? Probably somewhere, you know, near the leaves, but not necessarily right on the leaves. I'm going to cut this one back just a little bit more. And you can kind of play, you know, you can play with these afterwards, but we're going to put that one on, maybe the short one here, other side, something like that, and maybe one back there. Let's see. Okay, let's do something like that. That looks good. I'm getting all caught up in the, the strands of the glue gun. Oh, the hazards of working with hot glue, right? Thank goodness I quilt most of the time and not glue. Okay, so we'll get this little guy here, put the other little guy near him as well. I think there's enough glue in there. We'll see whether there is or not. Yep. And I'll move those around afterwards a little bit, and we'll put this little guy over here. Why not? Here, here, here. I don't know. I kind of like him near this guy. The toughest part of the project, figuring out where to put all your little embellishments. And we're just going to stick you in like that. Get you in there. I'm going to use my pencil. If you've got a stiletto, this might be a good time to use it too. That can be helpful just to hold things in place because it's nice and fine and pointy. All right, so I've got these here. Let's see if I can move him off a little bit down or something like that. Maybe you will go over there a little bit. And there we go. So it doesn't take long to make these. Very cute. I like how you can make them in different sizes. They don't take up a lot of ingredients, if you will, a lot of materials. I'm still, the worst hazard is, you know, the hot glue gun with all its little tendrils, but they make a really cute decoration. Now I have some tips for you on making this as well that I want to share with you. So first off, of course, I already talked about the width and the height of the fabric that you're going to use, and that will make different pumpkin shapes. So if you want something that is, you know, tall rather than short and squat, you know, you're going to have something that's a good height and then not quite as long in length. You can make them little tiny sizes. It's really cute. It's cute to have a variety of sizes for them. Also, as I mentioned, with the stem on them, if you want a chunkier stem, make a longer piece of felt or cut a longer piece of felt. When you roll it up, it'll be chunkier. To do that, you can make these whatever size you want, as many colors as you want. If you want to do something totally different, that's fun. Free cut or trace your leaves, right? Whichever you want to do. Free cutting works fine, and again, it gives it that organic look. And then the other thing you can do with those leaves is, if you wanted to, you could add some embellishment to them. So I've added some hand embroidery stitches here, a back stitch and some French knots on a couple of these leaves, which is really fun. You could also use the decorative stitches on your sewing machine to do that if you wanted to. Now, if you're using a really dense stitch, I would suggest that you put some wash away or tear away stabilizer behind your leaf, just so it doesn't all scrunch up. So that can make a nice addition, something a little different to your leaves. The other thing I've done with both of these, and you didn't see me do it with this one, is I wanted to add some weight on the bottom, okay? This little guy doesn't have any weight on the bottom, so he's very light, okay? These, I wanted to make sure that there was something a little heavier on the bottom so they weren't quite so light, so that, you know, the cats don't bat them around the house. So you can use different things. You can use some curtain weights if you wanted to. You could put them, you could actually use your glue gun and glue them down to the bottom of the pumpkin before you start stuffing it. Or you could use something like I did, which is these little small rocks. Now, I don't know if these are for aquarium or where I got them from exactly, but I have these little rocks, okay? And I just put them on the bottom, spread them out, and then I put my stuffing on top. So they're fairly small, but they do give some weight to these. You can hear them, right? But they don't really move around because they're, you know, they just kind of sit in place because the stuffing holds them there, okay? So it gives more weight to these. I think it, you know, helps them to stay wherever you put them, so they're not going to be falling over if somebody bumps into them. They don't move all that easily. So those are some tips for you on how to make these pumpkins and different variations on them. I hope you'll give it a try. Lots of fun to make and great for your fall decor. Now I've shown you how to make these pumpkins, but there are other pumpkin projects that you can make as well. And don't worry, I've got you covered. Check out this video. It has all the helpful information that you'll need. And for more helpful quilting information, be sure to go to my website at www.chatterboxquilts.com.